I wonder if some of the dysfunction in the post Black albums arises from that. You know, I always blame it on the bands become too big, that they can't really touch base with what made them big to begin with. I mean, there are some bands, and we've covered it, where bands peak early and bands peak late. Soundgarden was one where we talked about, and I think they peaked in the middle of what they were. Faith No More, I think, peaked early. With, I think, all four of these bands, they peaked early, and the question is like longevity. And me personally, I think Megadeth Megadeth and Slayer actually have maintained enough of a adoption and progression of their sound, but yet still kept it so that if you pick up a new Megadeth album, it sounds like Megadeth. If you pick up a new Slayer album, it sounds like Slayer. Where Metallica and Anthrax, I don't know if it's necessarily done the same thing. And admittedly, I'm going to admit in there a bias against Anthrax, as I've said. Not that I hate them or dislike them or anything. I just, their sound doesn't appeal to me as I mean, the others do. So, you know, it's one of those things that
I'll listen to Anthrax's new album whenever it's released.
Are they putting out a new one?
I haven't seen a new one coming.
Yep, sometime this year.
I will check it out. Like there's so much to them that, like, I pick out pieces and I'm like, man, I love this and I love this and I love this, and just putting it together doesn't mesh for me. It's actually in many ways very akin to my issue with Rush. Like, there's so much to Rush. I'm like, oh man, that's a great bass line, or oh, that's great drums, or this is great guitar. Okay, with Rush, there's a little bit of an issue I have with the singer, but like,
hey,
I think
I have the same issue with Megadeth, with Dave's voice.
Yep.
There are some songs that he does. I'm just kind of like, you know, kind of cringy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I get that. And the same kind of thing with like Rush. Like, to me, my comfortable spot with Rush as far as like vocals, probably like 80s, you know, on. I'm not really too much of his stuff in the 70s because he does that more of the hamster sound. But
hold on here. Please define the hamster sound. Like, how do you make a hamster sound in music? Is this like
the howling hamster of Hades?
The
The howling hamster of Hades from Toronto, Canada, Mr. Geddy Lee.
Hamster.
What are you talking about?
About. Oh, we're going to sing this next song. It's about something great. Now I'm pissing off.
No, but okay. I think as far as like
Canadians, we love you. Just so you know.
But I mean, yeah, as far as like Megadeth goes, like if you listen to Countdown to Extinction, that album to me sounds like cyborgs are playing on that record. You don't hear a scratch like a somebody brushing their pick on the string. Nothing. It just sounds like so machine-like. That whole album, like Psychotron, all of that stuff. And then you go from that to Euthanasia. That's like a big stark contrast.
Yeah.
And then Cryptic Writings, which I still liked, even though you could definitely tell they were going into a more melodic direction. And but they did have some things that would come along like after that in the 2000s and stuff. Me looking at those bands now, like especially like Metallica, now I find myself listening to Ride the Lightning more. And so I look at those bands differently, because when I got into metal, it was like around like the early 90s, and I didn't stop until like maybe 2010s, like 10,000, like early 2010s. And that's when, you know, things in life took for a different turn, so I had to kind of unplug from music for quite a while. But yeah, so I mean, I look at the music stuff now. Like I just went to the like Century Media Records, which is a label I used to follow, and all the bands that are on there now, I'm like, who's that? Who's that? Who is that? Who is that? I don't know who that is. I mean, you know, I know that I am out of practice. Way out.
That comes with all this gray.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's a great line from The Simpsons where the grandfather's like, "You once were hip, but now you're no longer hip. It'll happen to you. It'll happen to you." Like that whole, all of a sudden, the world changes.
Well, something about the Big Four, and this also has to do with about how a lot of the fans prefer the older stuff, and how it's almost a different generation later on. Is thematically, these bands started off largely with something to say about society. Something. In the case of when I first heard Injustice for All, I was expecting, you know, demons and Satan, and all of a sudden I'm hearing about, you know, Blackened, talking about smoking and polluting the air and Justice for All, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is not what I was expecting. Then I start backtracking and I listen to, you know, Creeping Death, and I'm like, holy crap, this is a biblical tale. Their later stuff deviates away from that kind of theme, and that's also some of where early Megadeth fans jump ship, and when they go to the more melodic era, it's not as socio-political anymore. That's a dividing line for people.
Listening to, I mean, starting to get back into listening to all the Megadeth albums that I have going from beginning to end. One of the things that I did notice was with Anthrax, I got to take a step out, but the other three, yeah, you're looking at political issues, religion issues, like Slayer. You want to talk about some religious issues, but and Megadeth, with the three of them, you're looking at social commentary. With Metallica, like, it seemed like post Black Album, there's a disconnected social commentary. I can't really comment too deeply on Slayer because I haven't gone through the back end on their end of it. And in Anthrax, there's kind of a floating with it. And I haven't really dug into the lyrics on that end of it. But since I had been focusing on Megadeth, there is still a perpetual kind of political commentary in there. But there's also, there's a man getting older. And if you're listening to reading the lyrics or listening to the lyrics, Mustaine is hurting. Like, just, dude, he has messed himself up. And it comes through on just different songs. And it reminds me of when, who was the country singer who covered Nine Inch Nails' Is Hurt?
Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash. It reminds me of that, and that kind of thing out there. And I don't see that same kind of personal reflection coming from the later Metallica albums. And maybe I'm not reading it right. And maybe I'm not seeing it. And sometimes you can be standing there looking at a forest and not see a bird on a tree until somebody is like, dude, it's right there. Maybe it's there, and I just need somebody to point it out. But for Megadeth, the only straying that I've seen on it is that it seems to be into a more personal introspection with a portion of their songs, and the exterior has been more focused on, or the rest of it is a social commentary. So it'd be interesting to take that angle and see how they've developed. But definitely, I agree with you. Like, the early stuff is all seems to be very much social commentary. which maybe that's the disaffected youth that we are now no longer young or old and gray. And the message that was said at the time still hasn't been fulfilled.
I was looking at the comment section on social media.
Oh, well, that's a bad place to start right there.
Yeah, everybody's reaction to their version of Ride the Lightning. A lot of people were dumping on it, you know, and slinging a lot of mud at Dave Mustaine, whatever, you know. I look at it like this. It's like he's credited in the song as one of the writers. He's allowed to do the song. And a lot of people seem to overlook is the fact that here's a guy, very talented guitar player, was in probably the biggest band in the world at the time, gets fired, goes home on a bus, comes up with the idea for Megadeth, comes back, you know what I mean, and is nipping at the heels of the biggest band in the world for quite a while, you know, and that's one dude. And he's like, I mean, say what you want, but the guy's driven. He is motivated. Yeah, you got to have a great work ethic to do that. And he has made some accomplishments, you know, under the Megadeth banner, because he could have just as easily either like quit when he got fired from Metallica or just went into another direction. So, I mean, I think what his accomplishments were pretty impressive, you know.
I remember when after Rust in Peace came out, Guitar World or one of the magazines came out with their awards for the year, where they give, you know, album of the year, guitarist of the year. And I remember Marty Friedman getting guitars or being passed over by Kirk Hammett. And a lot of people were very polarized about that. Mm-hmm. And I think some of the success of early Megadeth was you did have people kind of split into two camps, the Metallica camp and the Megadeth camp. There were the ones that enjoyed both, but there were the hardcores for each side. And I think that's something that maybe that's the reason why Anthrax doesn't quite fit in that same camp for you, Ryan, is that they weren't that polarized.
They didn't play that game.
The other band, yeah, they fit in their own spot without having to have their own nemesis.
But I mean, Slayer didn't have a nemesis. I mean, it wasn't like Slayer's out there like punching people in the face.
Slayer pretty much had their own gimmick, really. I mean, when you knew what you're going to get if you go to a Slayer show. It's like, okay, it's like going to see AC/DC. All right, the next couple of hours is going to be pretty loud, so it's going to be a lot of energy, and just roll with it.
I think the Slayer crowd was for the crowd that said, no, you can have your Metallica or you can have your Megadeth. We have Slayer. We're even more hardcore.
Yeah.
We're the hardcore.
The Anthrax fans are all like, hey, we're just here to have a good time.
Yeah. And I mean, you get into that feud between the two bands, and the part of the problem with early Metallica is you don't know how much Mustaine effect was on those albums. Even though he stopped recording with them and Hammett ended up taking over as the lead guitarist on it, you don't know how much of that was carried over. I was watching a video the other day where it was talking about how, like, here's the studio recording that they did, and then here's the finished product. Metallica changed it, and in many ways made the original studio recordings of what Mustaine put out with them, they made it better. Okay, cool. So, I mean, they made a modification to it. But at the same token, you can't deny, I mean, you get past, forget the order. What was it? Around the time, whatever the album was right before, was it Ride the Lightning that came right before?
That was right before Puppets. Lightning was 84, Puppets was 86.
Okay, maybe it was right before Injustice for All would have been Puppets, right?
Yes,
Um,
if you're not counting the Garage Days EP.
yeah, which I don't. That's them playing covers. But if you listen to that and you focus on that, by that point, I mean, there really shouldn't have been any Mustaine effect left. I mean,
There is one credit on Master of Puppets to him, and that's Leper Messiah.
okay, so they had a leftover bit of it, but I mean, so maybe is there an argument that the guitar work of Mustaine never really recovered? I mean, by the time you get to Injustice for All, there definitely isn't, and then you get into the Black Album. So, and I mean, for I think most listeners, the Black Album is kind of this weird pinnacle point. It's where Metallica changed, and I mean, there are still people who like Saint Anger and Load and Reload. What's the other newer one that they put out? But
after those, you had your Saint Anger, then your Death Magnetic, and then
Death Magnetic. Yeah, and I mean, I think those albums are okay to listen to. Actually, Load I have a little bit of a hard time listening to, but the rest of I refuse to get Reload. But I think the rest of them after that, I think they're okay to listen to. The problem is I don't think they have any heat, any passion, or it's almost like they went and did it to make a paycheck, and it feels disappointing in the fact that it's like you want, it's like the person who's writing the book, and you know that they're just writing a sequel so that they get more revenue.
Well,
Not necessarily because they care about the characters anymore.
I'm gonna say that about how you feel about the vocals of Rush and everything, how they are an ear sore for you. I feel the same way every time.
Ear source rough. It just doesn't appeal to me.
I feel the same way, but even though I can't even like get through the album, I can't listen to Saint Anger. Those drums are just like, it's dry. Within 30 seconds, I turn it off.
I'm not saying it's a good album. I'm just saying
that has got to be the worst drums mix I've ever heard ever.
Well, sorry. And the worst part is the second you said Saint Anger, I hear dun 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 dun, which is like that beginning drum.
Yes.
Oh. Okay, Saint Anger is rough around the end. Death Magnetic was definitely better, but it's still, it feels passionless. And the sad part about that is you have probably one of the greatest bassists. I mean, I don't know if he's in a top 10, but
think about it. During that time, that was when Jason left. So large.
I know.
Way,
but Trujillo. I'm sorry, Trujillo is unbelievably good bass player.
Yeah.
And I mean, the bass work is good on those albums. I'm not going to say it's not. But at the same token, you have an incredible bass player. You have guys who have shown their ability to play well. I don't know. There's something in it. So this quote has stuck with me. You guys know who Grace Slick is, right?
Yes.
From
yes,
Jefferson Airplane.
Tracking.
Huh?
Tracking.
Oh, you are tracking. Pump was looking a little confused, so that's why I was making sure. So there was a quote that she made. She turned 50, and she basically just went, "All right, I'm done. Like, I am no longer recording music. I think it is ridiculous anyone over 50 to record music at this point in time, or to try and record rock. Like, I am done with rock." And she flat out quit. Not just like quit. She done. Like, she went out, she became a painter. She went and did whatever the hell she wanted to that was not music. I mean, she might still do some music on the side, who God only knows, but effectively she quit the industry flat out because she thought it was ridiculous being older than that and trying to be in the rock world. It ever since reading that, which has been recently, it strikes me. It's like, wow, I wonder if there's something to that. But then you look at somebody like, okay, Megadeth putting out the most recent album. Is it their best? That's a story for another podcast. In fact, it will be another podcast for those listeners out there. But you look at things like Lemmy in Motorhead. I don't know, they were not doing their best necessarily at the end, and I'm not saying they were phoning it in. I'm sure they were playing well into it, but did it really feel like there was the passion or heat there?
Well, I understand what you're saying, because especially in the last 5 years, because that's when Lemmy started getting sick.
So Ryan, is your question, or is it more of a statement of should people just opt out when they don't have anything more to say, or should there be a time when you're not young anymore, you can't represent?
I don't know. I think for me, even doing stuff like this with podcasting, but when I was doing a lot of writing when I was younger, when one of the things that I found for it was tapping into emotion, tapping into feelings. And there's something about growing older that you learn how to manage those feelings. And I'm not saying you get them under control. I'm not saying that like every day is a happy day and look at the shiny stars. But there is something about diversity and pain and emotion, and that has an effect on creation. That, I mean, you even look at it in relation to having a child. It can be lust, it can be rage, it can be love, it can be any particular combination, but it is that moment of creation is an intense moment of emotion in some way, shape, or form, by one party or the other. With music, with art, I think we do adopt a lot of art of artists, and we go, oh, this is good because we have gotten something else from them, or they have mastered something. I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy, but a painter who has identified a style and continue to sell that and make money on it doesn't necessarily mean they're pushing the envelope and making something better. I don't know. I mean, it's a hard thing, much like it's hard to say that Bob Dylan's most recent album is bad or good based on the fact of whether or not he is putting enough emotion into it. But you look at somebody like Springsteen. I think Springsteen, despite his fame, is actually still, whether or not I like the music personally, I think he's still infusing it with a sense of passion to it. And I wonder if there becomes a point where, and I mean, me personally, within like a creative fiction component of it, I don't have that passion right now for that. And so I don't want to write anything that is like a creative fiction right now in any way, shape, or form, because I know I am going into it with a jar or a glass that's half full. And if I can't give that all, then it's going to feel lackluster. And that's where I wonder if a lot of these bands, or bands in general, reach a point. It's not necessarily like Grace Slick said, where boom, you hit 50 and you're done. I mean, there are plenty of artists who have gone past that 50 line and still had passion for something. In Grace Slick's end of it, she didn't give up art as a whole. She gave up music and rock as a whole and turned into an artist, like a painter. So she took that passion, she created that passion in a different zone and applied it. And so maybe there is a component of it that at some point in time, when you have lost that passion, you have to move on.
Henry Rollins did the same thing when he basically he came to a point where he was like, okay, I'm done. And he disbanded the Rollins band. And that's why he focused on spoken word tours, doing podcasts, and like just doing mainly like making appearances. Now, like he's working on a project, I guess, devoted to like the history of punk rock. So, yeah, he's as far as like he's not really like he may do like a reunion, like one-time gig with like Black Flag or something for a special cause, like a charity or something, but that's it. Like he's not gonna like be actively doing music anymore full time.
But here's the thing: is that doesn't mean he might not. And in doing like a one-off show to like if you watch like Led Zeppelin or something where they get together and they're like, we're never going to record again. But all right, they're never recording again. They're not going to create new music, but they are still willing to put together and do a show of their old stuff. They're still, and it's the difference between the creation and the presentation. Megadeth, Metallica. I mean, I saw. I mean, it's years old now, but recording of Metallica doing a live show. Dude, it sounded awesome. I'm not gonna lie, it sounded awesome. But it was predominantly their older stuff that they still had a passion for when they were recording it. I think they had more of a passion for it. That those songs still sound awesome. They can still play. They still have the ability to perform. But whether or not to create, I think, is a different thing than the ability to perform. In many ways, they've kind of become a cover band of themselves, as weird as that sounds to be. So
there's, I think, if you think about like the big four of like thrash in itself, like the amount of metal staple riffs, when you think of like certain tunes like Symphony of Destruction, that riff, and then you have like South of Heaven, the riff to South of Heaven, the riff, what I mean? All of these are like, For Whom the Bell Tolls. All of these are like really like classic, grab your attention kind of riffs, and they're the ones that kind of like I think is the reason why so many people have these types of discussions, because a lot of that music is still, being discussed about as far as like being the standard of what, like, this is what is good metal. Even like the younger audiences I've seen online are still like hailing these bands as like the measuring stick.
And I think since we were talking about the big four on this, have they